On the night of June 13, 1876, in the hills near Natchez, Mississippi, one of the most brutal slave revolts in U.S. history took place. After decades of systematic torture, 47 enslaved men and women rose up and executed a vengeance so precise and merciless. It left 4 overseers dismembered and a plantation master begging for his life. This is not just the story of rebellion. This is the raw account of how extreme oppression can forge human beings into weapons of righteous reckoning. A night when the blood of the oppressors soaked the same soil that had long feasted on the sweat and tears of the oppressed. Before we continue with the video, leave a comment telling us where you're from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The breaking point. The air in the slave quarters was heavy, thick with memories that wouldn't fade. It wasn't just the smell of sweat or decay. No. It was the scent of suffering that had been building for generations. Burnt flesh, damp wood, chains that seemed to vibrate even when they lay still. The very earth held memories, and lately it had started to speak. Isaac Freeman sat on the same stone every evening, just a few steps from the whipping post, not because he enjoyed it, but because from there he could see everything. Who was limping? Who watched too long? Who whispered when they thought the darkness would keep their secrets? But more than seeing, Isaac listened. He always did. He heard chains rattle before they moved. He heard whips cut through air before they touched skin. He heard his wife scream, even years after they had dragged her away. And now he heard something else. "The earth's talking again," old Elias said, his eyes white as ash, his voice soft as moss. He sat in the corner, rubbing a string of beads carved from bone. "She's saying, it's time." Isaac didn't speak. He just tightened his grip on the rusted iron spike he kept hidden in his bedding straw. It wasn't a proper blade, more like a tooth pulled from a dead mule, but it would do what needed doing. The plan takes shape. It had been weeks since the last shipment disappeared down the river. The colonel blamed the workers, of course, said they stole, they were lazy, they cursed his luck. Reuben, the biggest of the overseers, made sure 3 men got whipped nearly to death. 1 didn't get back up. No name, no marker. Isaac dug the hole, and when he laid the man down, he saw it. A root pushing up from the grave like a crooked finger reaching through the dirt. The old man was right. The earth had started whispering, and it was whispering vengeance. That night, deep in the belly of the quarters, 47 shadows gathered. Not loud, not rushed, like a storm brewing slowly. These weren't dreamers. These were people who had already died once. People with empty eyes and full hearts. People who weren't afraid of death, because death already knew their names. 3 months, Clara said, her voice low and tight as rope. Clara wasn't even 25, but she carried more sorrow than most men twice her age. Her baby sister was sold off at 6. Her man was hanged for looking the wrong way. But her back never bowed. Her hands were steady, and her eyes were lit with something holy. "There's no running," Isaac added. "No praying they'll treat us better. We take it all." "How are we going to do it?" whispered Josie, a boy with burns all down his arm from the sugar vats. Isaac looked around the room. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. "Same way they did us," he said. "Bone for bone, mark for mark." Outside, the wind picked up. The cane stalks rustled like ghosts laughing. The soil shifted beneath the floor, and somewhere far off, a whip hung silent on its nail, waiting for the hand that once held it to bleed. The Judgment Circle. The moon hung like a cracked tooth in the sky, throwing just enough light to catch the gleam of sweat and steel. Down in the hollow, behind the smokehouse, and past the cane rows, they gathered again, the 47. A circle formed, boots dug into the mud, eyes sharpened by grief. No one spoke at first. Words were too loud for what had to be said. This wasn't a meeting. This was a judgment. Isaac stood in the center, his shadow stretching like a scar across the dirt. "There's no white court going to hear our case," he said, his voice low like thunder waiting. "There's no law but the one we make now." Elias sat on a broken barrel, fingers twitching like he was playing some invisible banjo. He smiled without teeth. "You all ready to speak what the earth been screaming?" The group nodded. One by one they stepped forward. calling out names. Reuben, the one who tied my mama to the wagon axle. She never walked right after. Jeb, the one who poured hot lard on my cousin's back just because he tripped. Miss Hattie, she didn't swing a whip, but she watched, smiled while it cracked. Each name was a stone thrown into a still pond, and the ripples, they didn't fade. They grew. Clara stepped forward last. In her hand, she held a cloth, old, frayed, blood-stained. Her sister's dress, the only thing she got back after they sold the girl off to Louisiana. "I want mine to scream," she said. "I want him to feel her bones breaking, one by one." Isaac nodded. He didn't flinch. Then we got work to do. Preparing for war. Over the next weeks, the plan took shape like a quilt stitched in shadows. Each person had a piece. Josie, small and quiet, watched the overseers, learned their habits, when they drank, when they relieved themselves, when they bragged loud about whipping men twice their size. Abner, the ox handler, stashed blades in the troughs, covered in manure so the dogs wouldn't smell them. Clara and the kitchen girls laced molasses bread with wild bitter root, just enough to slow the heart, fog the mind. Elias, he didn't move from his spot, but he listened. He heard every footstep, every hushed curse, every lie muttered under breath. Said the dead told him things. Isaac believed him. "The first one," Isaac said, "dies like he lived, swinging that whip." And just like that, the order was set. They wouldn't strike fast, they'd strike clean, one by one, eye for eye, sin for sin. By the fire that night, Elias whispered to Isaac, "You ever hear a chain scream?" Isaac shook his head. "You will, when it breaks." And somewhere in the dark, past the rows of cane and sorrow, a link rusted loose. The trial was done, the sentence already burning slow in their bones. The first strike, noon in Natchez, hit like a hammer. The heat curled off the ground in waves and the flies danced slow over sweat and silence. Most folks rested then, overseers full from pork and rum, bellies heavy, eyes drooping, but not Isaac. He waited by the forge, same place he once made horseshoes and barrel rings under Reuben's lash. Same place he lost 3 fingernails to a red-hot rod just because he blinked too slow. Same place he buried his rage day after day inside coals and iron. Now it was coming back up, hotter than fire, sharper than steel. Reuben always came to the forge around midday, said he liked the warmth. "Good for the bones," he'd joke. Thought Isaac was too broken to be dangerous. Thought wrong. Josie had given the signal earlier. Reuben had his usual 2 drinks of sugarcane liquor, then a half dip of snuff, just enough to loosen him, make him slow. The moment he stepped inside, Isaac had already turned his back, pretending to work. The iron tongs lay ready on the anvil, their edges filed down to bite deep. "Aren't you done with that wheel yet?" Reuben barked. Isaac didn't speak, just kept hammering. The clank echoed like a funeral bell. Reuben stepped closer, reached for the chain on the wall, and that's when Isaac turned fast as a storm, tongs in hand. He gripped Reuben by the collar and slammed him into the post hard enough to rattle his teeth. Before he could scream, Isaac shoved the hot end of the tongs between his ribs. Not enough to kill, enough to remind. "Feel that," he growled. "That's what it felt like when you burned my brother's leg. He was 13. Reuben writhed. Isaac moved quick, roped his arms, slammed him to the floor. Nobody heard. The forge was loud, and the overseers were drunk. He broke the first finger slow, then the wrist, the same hand that held the whip. "You broke us every day, every hour. Now feel what it's like." The bones snapped like dry sticks, one, then another, then the leg. And when Reuben finally begged, truly begged, Isaac leaned close. "We aren't begging anymore." He left the body in the coal bin, covered it in ash. By the time the others came looking, Reuben was just gone, disappeared, whispered about, feared. In the quarters that night, no one asked questions, but Clara passed Isaac a scrap of cloth, a token, a sign. "One down," she said. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Even though the sky was clear, the first crack had come, and the storm was just starting. The Colonel's fear. The next morning dawned hot and still, like the world itself was holding its breath. Colonel Horace Whitmore sat on his veranda, silver cup in hand, sipping his chicory brew. The steam curled slow, the smell rich, but the taste today was bitter, sour even. He spat and cursed. "Where the hell is Reuben?" No one answered. No one had seen Reuben since the day before. His quarters were untouched, whips still hanging neat on the wall. But the dogs wouldn't go near the forge, just whined and paced, tails low, as if they smelled something wrong. The Colonel didn't like things going quiet. He banged the cup down and barked orders, called for Jeb, another overseer. Meaner than most, eyes like nails. "Find him, or find someone to blame." Jeb nodded. He knew how to get answers, with fist, fire, or rope. That afternoon, 3 young men were lined up in the yard. Didn't matter that they had nothing to do with Reuben. They were black. They were there. That was enough. Isaac stood at the edge of the crowd, hands tight, jaw clenched. He'd seen this before. The display, the theater. Break one, so the rest fall quiet. Jeb paced before the boys, spoke like a snake. "Y'all think this is a game? Think y'all can hide him from us?" One boy shook, another wet himself. Then Jeb stepped to the third, Abner's youngest, barely 16, and raised his hand. And that's when Clara moved. Quick, precise. From the crowd, she tossed a stone straight to Isaac's feet. The signal. Isaac turned and walked calm as Sunday into the barn. There, Abner waited. They had work to do. The second fall, Jeb liked his coffee with 2 fingers of bourbon, a habit the kitchen girls knew well. That evening, Clara herself brought the tray. Steady hands, bowed head. She placed the cup on the Colonel's desk, then backed away. He didn't look up, didn't see the sliver of glass inside, didn't taste the bitter root until his chest began to tighten. He called for help, but the guards were out looking for Reuben. No one came. And that's when he heard it. A whisper, soft as a breath. "Justice doesn't knock, Colonel. She comes in swinging." The voice came from the shadows. Jeb was there, but not for long. Abner struck first, mallet to the side of the knee. Jeb fell like a sack. Then came Isaac, calm, cold, precise. He didn't rush, didn't shout, just broke the bones. The arms that beat, the fingers that pointed, the jaw that spat hate. Clara stood in the doorway, watched it all. Jeb tried to beg, tongue thick, eyes wild. Isaac leaned in close. "This one's for the boy who didn't do nothing but stand in the sun." And then, silence. Next morning, the Colonel sat pale in his chair, lips blue, hands shaking. Jeb was gone. Another vanishing. Another whisper through the quarters. The sugar still boiled, the cane still got cut, but now the air tasted different, sweeter and saltier, like blood had seeped into the brew. It was Clara who first said it. "There's no fire without a grave. We need a place to bury the proof." The fields were too open, the cane too easy to search, but behind the smokehouse, past the rusted carts and moldy hay, there lay the dry well, choked with dust and bones of creatures no one remembered, deep, dark, and long forgotten. Perfect. The quiet overseer. That week the quarters felt like a held breath. 2 overseers gone, no trace, no screams, no blood on the dirt, just silence, a heavy kind, the kind that made even the chickens go quiet. Colonel Whitmore doubled the patrols, put torches by the fences, had the dogs out day and night, but still, no signs. He couldn't admit it out loud, but fear had crawled up his spine and wrapped around his throat. Isaac walked like a man who had already seen the end of this story. He gathered 3 others, Elijah, tall and silent as pine, Rachel, with hands quick as snakes, and young Josie, still bearing the burns, but carrying fire in his eyes. Their target, Overseer Miles, the cruel one, not loud like Reuben, not sloppy like Jeb, quiet, precise, cold. He beat for discipline, not pleasure. That made him worse. "He doesn't feel nothing," Elijah said. "Then we'll teach him what it's like," Isaac answered. Miles took the path behind the corn rows every Thursday, out to check the fence traps, always alone. Said it cleared his mind. That day, the fog hung low, thick like soup. The air was heavy with storm. They waited near the well. Rachel played hurt, limping, calling out like a fox with a broken paw. "Help me, please." Miles came slow but curious, saw her bent over reaching for her ankle, didn't see Elijah behind the brush. Didn't feel the cord till it was around his neck. Isaac stepped out last, calm, staring. "This one's personal." They didn't kill him quick. They broke him just enough, laid him at the lip of the well, tied his hands, gagged his mouth, and before they pushed him over, Isaac leaned close. "This is where you put Eliza, 1869. She was with child." Miles's eyes went wide. He tried to speak. Isaac didn't let him. They dropped him down, heard the thud, then silence. Rachel spit down the hole. "Now we're even." They covered the well with boards, then dirt, then old wagon wheels. Made it look like junk, but they knew. The earth knew. That night, Elias sat by the fire, humming. 3 gone, the wheel turning slow, but sure. By the end of the week, the colonel didn't come out of his house. The dogs howled at nothing. The sugar vats boiled like they knew. And in the quarters, a new name was whispered like a prayer. Not Miles. Justice. The colonel's judgment. They got him at dusk. Colonel Horace Whitmore, Lord of the Plantation, Keeper of Whips, King of Cane. Took 5 men to bring him down. Not because he fought, but because pride doesn't fall easy. He was drunk when they came, sitting in his study, rambling to the walls, polishing a pistol he'd never fired. He didn't even look up when the door creaked open. "About time, Jeb," he slurred. "Fetch me another." Then he saw Isaac, and Isaac didn't say a word, just raised the butt of a rusted rifle and brought it down hard. When the colonel woke, he wasn't in his house anymore. They dragged him to the quarters, tied him to the post where so many had bled, lit a ring of lanterns so even the dark couldn't look away. The 47 surrounded him. No masks, no secrets. Just faces scarred, burned, strong, names he never cared to learn, eyes that remembered everything. Clara stepped forward. "Do you know who I am?" He blinked, blood on his lip, eyes cloudy. You're just a..." Rachel slapped him hard enough to crack his jaw. "Try again." "You're a damn house girl," Clara smiled. "No, I'm the child of the woman you sold for 2 goats and a jug of molasses. I'm the scream your walls still echo. I'm the nightmare that's real." She turned. Elias approached, blind but not lost. His hands trembled as he reached for the colonel's face. "Feel that?" he whispered. "That's the same rope you hung my brother with. I braided it myself." The colonel struggled, cursed, spat. Isaac finally spoke. "You always said the law was the whip, the post, the fire." He stepped closer. "Well, here's your trial." One by one, they spoke. Abner, whose father was drowned for refusing to work on Sunday. Rachel, whose breasts were burned for breastfeeding her own baby before the mistress's. Josie, who still walked like his bones never healed right. Each voice, another nail in the coffin of the old order. Then came the confession. They didn't beat it out of him. They made him listen. They made him look at the eyes, at the scars, at the faces of the ones who survived what he built. And when it broke him, when he wept, when his words stumbled out like vomit, no one cheered. There was no glory in it. Just truth, ugly, heavy, and real. "Yes," he cried. "I ordered it. All of it. I owned them. I had the right." Isaac leaned down. "No. You had power. That isn't the same." Then Clara walked up, held the same branding iron they used on her uncle's chest. Red hot, she looked him dead in the eye. "This mark, it's not yours anymore." And she pressed it to his chest. He screamed like a dying hog, but the sound didn't echo. The land swallowed it, same way it swallowed everything else he ever did. That night, no dogs barked, no overseer hollered, no cane was cut. The plantation slept, and the old world began to crack. The great fire. The sky turned red long before the fire touched. It wasn't a natural dusk. It was a warning. The kind trees feel. The kind the birds flee from. The kind that makes even silence run and hide. Isaac stood at the edge of the field, Clara at his side. Behind them, the 47 held torches made from cane stalks, wrapped in cloth soaked with lard. Light flickered across faces carved by time, rage, and memory. The colonel. He was still tied to the post, breathing. Barely. But they weren't here for him anymore. Tonight was for the fields. Every lash, every bone cracked. Every child took, Isaac said, voice thick, throat tight. All of it was for this. He raised his torch. The others followed. This land drank our blood for too long, Clara said. Tonight it drinks something else. She stepped forward first, torch out, pressed it to the base of the dry cane. The flame caught like it had been waiting. Then Rachel lit the second row, Elijah the third, and in moments the fire ran. It didn't crawl, didn't smolder. It ran like a spirit unleashed, screaming through the fields, twisting through the stalks, clawing at the sky. The cane didn't burn quiet. It howled, popped, and hissed like it was crying out for every back it ever split open. From the big house, the flames looked like a curse, a judgment, a red halo rising over centuries of silence. The colonel began to scream, not from the fire, from the knowing, from realizing the thing he worshipped, profit, sugar, order, was melting down to ash right in front of his eyes. Isaac didn't turn to look at him. He looked at the fields, at the fire, and he smiled. Clara leaned close. This isn't revenge. This is freedom. The wind shifted, carrying the smoke across the quarters, into the house, up the hill. The dogs barked once, then went silent. Even they knew. The masters weren't in charge anymore. By dawn, the entire cane field was gone, blackened, wet, still steaming. Nothing left but stubborn bones, and soot. The sugar vats bubbled no more. The barrels stood empty. The wealth was gone, swallowed by fire and fury. And yet the 47 stood whole, not one lost. Isaac looked to the horizon. They knew what came next. Retaliation. Bloodhounds. Soldiers. But none of them stepped back, because now they were free in the one way that mattered. And the cane. It would never grow the same again. The Empire strikes back. The first boots hit Natchez soil 5 days later. Shiny uniforms, polished rifles, bayonets gleaming under the Mississippi sun. The Empire called it an insurrection. The papers called it a savage uprising. The colonels in Washington called it a threat to order. But in the hills above the plantation, they called it survival. Isaac had seen soldiers before, when he was a boy, hiding under his mama's skirt while they dragged off her brother in chains. He remembered the click of boots, the cold eyes, the way they smiled like they owned the air you breathed. Now he waited for them, with hands that knew how to fight back. The 47 had split into 3 bands after the fire. Not scattering, positioning. Elijah led a group through the swamp trails. Rachel took the ridge by the old chapel ruins. Isaac stayed in the hollow where the well water ran deep and the trees knew their names. They weren't running, they were setting traps. They dug pits covered in branches and cane husks, hung bells from old mule harnesses to signal movement, sharpened sticks from broken rake handles, but more